Where do your customers spend their time? Cisco actually asked this question in a survey to their customers, and they found that on average, their customers spend about 43% of their time just troubleshooting. Imagine how many business goals could have been accomplished by these companies if they didn't have to troubleshoot. In terms of money, it can cost up to $20,000 for an hour of downtime. And annually, IT downtime costs North American businesses almost $700 billion. And that's mostly due to loss of employee productivity. But the survey participants, they also stated that low visibility into their network is one of the primary reasons why troubleshooting takes so long. These are the problems that network assurance solutions aim to solve. The goal of network assurance is really to help us find answers to questions. Questions like, are our end users having problems? If so, where are they occurring? Why are they occurring? Can I fix them? And how do we fix them? Otherwise, troubleshooting requires a lot of manual effort, and manual effort is time consuming. I'm back in Meraki Launchpad. So again, this is a demo that you can reproduce. And I'm currently looking at the network-wide clients page. And Meraki health information can be found in numerous places that we're going to look at. But one of them is here on the client page. And it's very useful because you're able to view this information from the client's point of view. I'm going to go ahead and click on a client in my list. And it's going to be the client details page that you're familiar with, but this new Meraki Health information adds a few new useful interface components. The first one I want to show you is this current client connection diagram here. This is showing me the complete path that this client takes to get out of the network. So I can see step by step where this client has to pass through, and if there's any problems, it's going to show me visually. And so you can see there is an issue with this access point, and if I hover over it, you can see that there is high channel utilization on 5 gigahertz. I can also see what port numbers these devices are plugged into. If I hover over a switch, I can see information about that switch. I can see same thing for the next upstream switch. And then if I hover over a cable, I'm going to be able to see things like packet counters and interface information. And so the reason this is so valuable is because I'm able to select a specific client and then see this information for this client. Only the relevant information that affects this client's path. And it's pulling information from these devices, but it aggregates it here. I don't have to click at all. There's no clicks involved to pull up this information. I'm simply hovering over these devices. So it makes it really fast and easy to find. And then my favorite feature is that I can hover over a device and I could run a ping right here, and I could click packet capture and it's going to start a PCAP file for me, making it very easy to digest this information. And then you'll notice that we had a few new tabs here at the top of the page. The first one I'll show you is the Connections tab. Some useful use cases here. If you imagine an IT admin who gets a ticket saying that there's issues with one specific device at a specific timestamp, this page is going to give you a clear distinction between these issues and which ones are actually affecting this client specifically at the connection phase. So if somebody calls and says, yeah, I'm unable to connect to wireless, it's not that it's slow, I can't even get on the network, this is where you'd want to come and look. And so I can see the overall number of successful connections. I can see if it is failing, at which step. Is it association, authentication, DHCP, DNS? And then which APs might this device be having problems with? It looks like our device is pretty healthy, but these are all the access points that it's connected to. And so far, I've had 0 failed connections across any of them. So that's good to see. I also can tweak this time frame a little bit, and I can drill down into the specific timestamps that I want to see. I can look over the last hour, the last 12 hours, the last day. And then I have my Performance tab. This is for after the client gets connected. This is for if a client calls you and says the wireless is slow, or I'm unable to load a web page for whatever reason on wireless. This is where you would come to diagnose those issues. So you've got the same sort of interface here at the top where I can change my timestamp and my filters. And as I scroll down, I've got some pretty useful wireless troubleshooting graphs. I can see my signal quality, and I can put that in SNR or RSSI, depending on what I want. And at first glance, it's a nice graph that gives you a visual representation of issues. I can see My graphs are green, that's pretty good. But as I hover over it, I get more detailed info. We're overlaying this graph with RF information and more specific details. So this is something that is useful for technical and non-technical people all in the same interface. And this page is pulling information from specific access points, and it's aggregating it here just so that your admins don't have to click between pages to figure these things out. And then if we scroll back up, we also have this history tab. And this is useful again for an IT admin that is going back and trying to figure out what happened at a specific time for a specific device. So it's sort of like your familiar event log in Dashboard, but we're giving you more information relevant to wireless here. So you can see I had a successful connection here, and if I expand that, I can see the time to connect. I can see the SNR at the time of connection. If there's a radius server involved, you can see that there. And if it failed, I'm also going to get information. Why did it fail? Was it because of that signal to noise ratio? That actually looked pretty good. We're collecting this information and logging it for you and assigning a timestamp to it to make it easier for you to find what happened at what times. We just looked at this view from the client point of view. We also collect a lot of this same information and we apply it to the access point. So I could come over here and go back to my access points list, and it will take me to my list of access points in the network. So I could simply select one of these. And you've seen this page before, but notice I've got a connections tab and a performance tab up here, just like I did on the client page. So if I click on the connections tab, very familiar, it looks very similar to what we had on the client page, but now we're looking at all of the connections for this access point. So every client that connected to this AP, how are they performing at that connection phase? If they're failing, where are they failing? So you can see that we're having quite a few failures at the authentication phase, and I'm able to visualize that here. Only 15% of my total connections are successful. As I scroll down, I can see problematic clients across all steps. I could say, okay, what are my most problematic clients for authentication? And then it will filter those for me. And then I can also come to my performance tab. This is useful for, say, for example, maybe a network admin wants to check and see how the wireless is performing next to the CEO's office. You should know where your APs are. Ideally, you put them on the map, and you can check on one access point in particular and look at the performance across that whole access point. So I can see the number of clients over time. I can see auto RF changes also overlaid on this timeline. I can see signal quality again for that whole access point. SNR, RSSI, wireless latency, interference, data rates, a lot of really useful information here, all on this one page aggregated for you. Now, we've looked at the client-specific view, we've looked at the access point view, we also have a network-wide view, and that is on the wireless health page. So this is something that's been around for a while, and this gives you a holistic view for the entire network. So that's why the first thing you're greeted with is a map of the office. I can see where my access points are that are having problems. So if somebody calls and says, hey, I think there's a problem in the southwest corner of the building, I can look and see, okay, yeah, there is. Maybe I want to click on that access point and drill into that a bit deeper. And you can continue scrolling. You've got a lot of the entire network in the wireless performance. I can go back to my connections tab. Again, you've got that familiar graph showing you where your devices might be failing to connect. And then you've also got some traffic latency here if you set up your DSCP tagging. Meraki Health is a huge component of our assurance story. And the best part of it is that it's included with your customers' existing licenses. So as long as they have a license for their access points and their switches and their appliances, this all just shows up in Dashboard. And the more Meraki devices they have, the more complete their picture of the network is going to be. Meraki Insight is an assurance platform in itself. We talked about it in our security and SD-WAN lesson as it pertained to SD-WAN, but even if your customer isn't an SD-WAN customer, this is still beneficial to them for these reasons that we're about to talk about. This is a product line that runs on the MX, and that means that there's no additional hardware required. So you simply assign a license to the appliance itself, and then that MX begins collecting this application metadata and sending that to Dashboard, where the Insight engine is going to analyze that information. Now, the web application health component, this is designed for SaaS applications. So Office 365, Google Drive, Salesforce.com, Box.com, It could even be your own application server as long as that traffic is passing through the MX appliance. And then WAN health is another component that provides your IT admins with a holistic view of WAN link performance for every MX uplink in the entire organization, all on one page. And then finally, VoIP health provides visibility into the performance of your VoIP services across the entire organization. We're going to take a closer look at Meraki Insight now in the dashboard. I'm back at Launchpad, and notice I have an Insight tab here. And there's my 3 components that we just talked about: Web App Health, WAN Health, and VoIP Health. I'm going to start with WAN Health. This is one of the newer additions to the product line. And this is useful because for organizations that have multiple networks, it gets very hard to keep track of all of the uplinks unless someone raises an issue. It's a very reactive way of supporting the network. Especially if you have more than 20 networks, the only way really to keep an eye on everything is to manually click on each appliance page. But what this is doing is aggregating these statistics for every uplink across the organization onto one page. So at a glance, I can see how many of my uplinks are performing well, how many are hard down right now, how many have poor performance or high usage. Just at a glance, I'm able to visualize this. And then I've got a table that I can filter, I can sort, I can add and remove columns as I want to. Maybe I want to see which ones have the highest packet loss or the highest average latency. Or maybe I want to see which ones have the highest usage. So we make it very easy to sort this information and then visualize which ones have problems. Think about a network admin that comes into work every morning and they want to know what are the top ISP issues that are affecting my various networks. And so they're able to do this at a glance with this page. It's a great page, honestly, for a NOC that they can keep up all the time, that they can always have front and center so that they can be more proactive rather than reactive with these types of things. And then the other component I mentioned was Web App Health. This is the one that we launched with Meraki Insights initially. And it's used really to help you monitor your mission critical applications. And the goal is really to reduce downtime by assuring the performance of these applications. Everything that we're seeing here, these are applications that we've already configured, but they're looking at metrics like latency, packet loss, network usage, web response time, and we're able to show at a glance, based on that information, where an issue is occurring with a web application. Of all these applications, I can see I am having WAN issues across the board. If I click on Google Drive, it's going to show me all of the locations that we're monitoring this application at. So you can see most of my locations are doing fine with Google Drive, but London in particular seems to be having a WAN and a LAN issue. So if I click on View Trends, it's going to take me even deeper, and now I'm looking at historical performance, and I'm looking at these metrics and analytics across the board. It did tell me that I did have a WAN issue, so if I click on my Uplinks tab, we're going to assign a performance score to that uplink, and sure enough, you can see my score is 54 out of 100, which is pretty low. So that's definitely an issue. Now I know that I need to contact my ISP and troubleshoot with them. Why am I having issues on this particular interface? If I did have more than one uplink here, you could see why this would be a useful tool to figure out if there's a problem that I could fix with SD-WAN. This is one in particular that I could. If it's a WAN issue, and I know that, then I would know that I can go and configure an SD-WAN policy to make sure that the right traffic is going over the best uplink at the time. And then if I were to go to my Clients tab, we also assign a performance score per client. Some of my clients are hitting this Google Drive and not doing very well, likely because they are going over that poor performing uplink. If I were to go back to my Web App Health page, you'll notice all of these applications have already been configured. But if I click on Edit on one of these are the thresholds at which this application is choosing to determine whether performance is good or bad. And then that way it can tell us where we need to focus our attention. We've gotten great feedback. Our customers love the product, but some of the constructive feedback has been that most of them have little to no knowledge of what these thresholds should be. Like good put. Good put is a real thing, but most customers aren't familiar with that terminology, so they don't know where to set that. You can see good put is the predicted maximum amount of data that could be transmitted per flow based on network latency and loss. The next step in our assurance journey here is to introduce machine learning into Meraki Insight. And so what we're doing is we're using this wealth of data that Insight already analyzes, and we're feeding it through this sophisticated machine learning algorithm that learns over time what a healthy network should look like for an organization. It's looking at things like past workloads, the number of users per network, across networks and applications. And we're going to analyze this on a per customer basis to autonomously identify anomalies that fall outside of their norm. We're able to dynamically adjust these thresholds, that's why we call this smart thresholds, so that any anomalies are detected and are called out. That way you have less false positives and you don't have to configure this on your own. So this is the first functionality that's going to use this machine learning. The last component of Insight that I wanted to show is VoIP Health. VoIP Health is the third component in this menu. Similar to WAN Health, it's a single page that shows you how all of your voice applications are performing across the organization. So if I click on one of these, I've got very useful stats to look at that are relevant to voice, like MOS score, loss, latency, jitter. I've got graphs so I can view that information historically over time. And then I also have a trace route tool. So if I want to try to pinpoint where an issue is occurring so I know where to focus my troubleshooting efforts, I can run this trace route and then it's going to return that information and show me where that traffic hit an issue along the way or where that's getting degraded. Now this application is performing fine. You can see my path is green across the board, no issues. But if there was an issue, one of these hops would turn red, and then I could also click on show hop by hop analysis to get a more detailed view of where that traffic might be breaking down. That's Meraki Insight in a nutshell.